The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. Today, vaccine-injured firefighter O'Brian Pastrana is fighting in the courts. We need to hear from him and his attorney, Sujata Gibson, and we need to go and stand with him and support him. After that, the legendary Meryl Nass has reform the regulatory state. Another blockbuster hour. You don't want to miss a minute of it. Stay with us the whole way. Before we get into O'Brian and Sujata, we have some news. And the big news that I wanted to talk about comes from last week. At least it's big news to me. I hope it matters to some of you out there. CHD's first Advocacy Day on the Hill happened. It was a remarkable day. We had hundreds of people show up. We had Rob Schneider was the MC there. We see Senator Johnson, Mary Holland, Noah Syndergaard, a Major League Baseball pitcher, Rob Schneider, who did MC it. Senator Johnson hosted us. It was just a truly phenomenal day. And there is the report that we really, truly focused in on for the day. We also had Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona speaking here. He tweeted this out. Thank you for joining us today. Children's Health Defense retweeted it. Some of Representative Gosar's staff told me he was smiling ear to ear after speaking at our event. I think he might be a Rob Schneider fan. I'm a Rob Schneider fan. You can do it. And that's what I posted over at Teachers for Choice. You could check out my summary at teachersforchoice.substack.com to see what happened in the daytime there. But here I want to show a clip. This is so important, of Senator Johnson talking about, quite honestly, the horrors of the COVID vaccine. And the FDA knew very early on just how dangerous this vaccine was. Let's show Senator Johnson at CHD Advocacy Day.
We found out that Peter Marks, head of CBER, the Center for Biologic Evaluation Research, the group within the FDA that approves vaccines, then supposedly do surveillance on safety signals, right? On March 1st, 2021, this is less than 3 months after the emergency use authorization was granted by CBER, was warned by their chief data mining analyst, Dr. Anna Scharsman, who's working with the inventor of the algorithm that's going to analyze VAERS, that algorithm was going to hide and mask safety signals. And he thanks for the report. 26 days later, using a new algorithm that unhid those safety signals, that they showed that the old system had 49 cases of extreme masking, and they showed him 25 safety signals of incredibly serious adverse events: sudden cardiac death, pulmonary infarction, Bell's palsy, different types of strokes. For 3 consecutive months, she kept doing these data runs, showing more and more safety signals, different types of sudden death. Now, do you think Peter Marks and the senior officials at FDA pinned a medal on her chest and said, God, thank you. We want to warn the American public. This is so important. This is our job. This is our responsibility to look for those needles in the haystack, to use these sophisticated algorithms to sift through all this data and determine this might be a safety signal that requires investigation, that requires us to warn the medical community so they're on the lookout for it. That's certainly what I thought safety surveillance was all about. That's what we were told it was going to be in October when Tom Schumer-Bakuro, heading up that group, gave a video presentation saying, we're going to use VAERS and we got this V-Safe system. And man, if you lose a day of work, we're going to be calling you up to find out exactly what's happening with you. That was all total, do we have any young people? Bullshit. Okay? Total and complete bullshit.
It is not often that a curse plays here on CHD TV, but Senator Johnson has been fighting extremely hard for a long time. That'll be our one for the year that we allow. God bless Senator Johnson. He is truly fighting for the people. He was truly fighting for those, especially who were injured or who had family members killed by this COVID shot. And that's really happened. That's why our major action for Advocacy Day, and still right now, is stop the COVID shots. Stop the COVID shots. The link is in the show notes to this action. If you haven't filled it out, please do. We have almost 20,000 emails across the country have gone in to Washington, D.C. on this action, urging all of the elected officials in Washington, D.C. Read the report. Read the report from Senator Johnson about how the FDA knew and how they hid all of this. And we need action. We need support for Senator Johnson's report. We need more subpoenas. We need more FOIAs. We need indictments. We need more attention to this. God bless Senator Johnson. On Advocacy Day on June 10th, we also showed Duty to Disobey, which was about military members who had refused the shot and lost their job, and about military members who took the shot and were injured. On that stage, you might see there, the New Yorkers might see Sophie Medina standing right next to Sonny Duncan on the left side. Sophie is part of Bravest for Choice. That is the New York City FDNY firefighters who fought against the vaccine mandate, brought 20,000 people over the Brooklyn Bridge in October of 2021. And here we are, June 2026, still in this battle and still fighting. And a Bravest for Choice member who we are here to highlight and talk about his legal struggles is O'Brian Pastrana. We've covered him in The Defender for a long time. He was vaccine injured not once, but twice. He was forced to get the second vaccine after being injured by the first vaccine, and in the court systems, fighting for years, and the lower courts have ruled against O'Brian. And because of that, now there is an appeal that will be argued and heard on Monday, June 22nd, I believe. Let's put up that flyer right here, Monday, June 22nd at 2 p.m. Please come to the Thurgood Marshall U.S. Courthouse, 40 Foley Square in Manhattan. We have been here so many times before as a movement of fired unvaccinated workers, as those who were injured. This one is extremely critical. The precedent it might set, if the lower court's decision to throw away O'Brian and his complaints, if that's allowed to stand, it is chilling what that will mean for all of us moving forward when it comes to any medical mandate. And with that, I want to bring on O'Brian Pastrana and his attorney, Sujata Gibson. Welcome to Good Morning, CHD. Thank you both for being here today.
Good morning.
So,
Good morning.
O'Brian, I want to open with you. A lot of people in our audience know you and know your story, but not everybody does. So why don't you please refresh everyone's memory? Tell everybody the mandate comes into New York City. You have to make these decisions. Tell people what happened.
Can you guys hear me? Can you see me well, Mike?
We got you. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me on there. Thank you to CHD. Thanks, Michael Caine. You guys are awesome. I'd be in the dark if you guys were not here holding, standing with me with the fight. 2021, 2020, you guys already know the pandemic was going on. We were all working day in, day out. Everybody knows firefighters do 24-hour shifts. For those of you who don't know, it's not because we want to get rich. Firefighters, EMS, police officers, we're here to help. They told us we needed to work through the pandemic as usual, through emergencies. That's what we do. We came in day and night. Like I'm sure you guys remember them banging the pots and pans outside. Everybody was solidarity, let's help each other out. When the mandates came down, everybody said we were not going to have to take it. And of course, like everything else, little but surely it started to trickle down that, wording started to change. Religious exemptions were getting thrown out. Medical exemptions were getting thrown out. I was 35 at the time. I had no medical history, no medications, no nothing. And I had a clean bill of health right before that shot. I know that because the fire department tests you every single year. You have to get tested. You need a clean bill of health. You need a full panel of doctors to say you are okay to proceed every year. That is part of the New York City's mandatory medical testing. As soon as I got the shot, I got an immediate reaction. I was told it was normal. Oh, these are normal. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Give it a week or so. Everything's going to go back to normal. You just make sure you take that next shot, because if you don't, you will not be considered fully vaccinated. I told them that I had a reaction. It was documented. I was rushed from work with the reaction. The reaction could not subside. Steroids was the only thing that was helping me out at that time. Despite my worries and concerns and my expresses that this was the vaccine, and I probably shouldn't have continued. I was coerced and told if you wasn't, you were not considered fully vaccinated, therefore you could be terminated, you could be fired, you could have a break of service, and ultimately you lose your pension. City employees we don't do, Michael, we don't do what we do to get rich. There's nowhere in the fine print that says, hey, you're going to be a millionaire after this. But what do we all know? You got coverage, you got benefits. You're not going to lose your job. And I was working for the New York City Fire Department since I was 20 years old. I had just turned 20. Now, you ask any grown man, that doesn't mean I'm an adult. I was still a boy. I had just become a young adult. And at the age of 35, unfortunately, with that second shot, that pushed me over the edge right into myocarditis. It started with anaphylaxis. That's the body's way of telling you something's wrong. This doesn't belong here. It led to myocarditis, which led to cardiomyopathy or heart failure, whatever you want to call it. I have so many different diagnoses at the age of 35. Coronary heart failure, heart scarring. I had shortness of breath, still have shortness of breath on a daily basis, chest pain on a daily basis, neuropathy, dysautonomia. These are all just chronic illnesses and diseases that someone in their 30s should not be exhibiting. Long story shrunk down after about a year and a half so of redundant testing over and over, the same testing, MRIs, all that stuff. The fire department was like, well, good news, you don't got to take any more tests. But unfortunately, you can no longer be a New York City firefighter. And I was forced into lesser disability. And that's where we're at now, unfortunately.
So O'Brian, so you were forced into early retirement because you were no longer physically fit because of the COVID shots, what they did to you. My understanding, and we're going to pass it to Sujata Gibson in a minute to make sure I'm correct, is that everybody recognized you were injured. You were injured by the COVID shot. The medical results and problems came from that. But nevertheless, they are not honoring the full extent of what your pension should be. And that's one of the big things that is being fought for in court. Sujata Gibson, along with Christina Martinez, are your attorneys representing you in this case, backed by Children's Health Defense. Sujata, tell us what happened in the lower court that he lost, what is being fought for, and where are we at right now?
Well, the lower court, you're absolutely right, Michael. Everybody recognizes that O'Brian Pastrana was horrifically injured by this COVID shot, that his heart failure resulted from this COVID shot, and even his initial anaphylaxis. So when he was saying he went to the hospital, that he was sent from work, they sent him to the emergency room because he was having ongoing severe anaphylaxis from the first shot. And that's all documented in these medical records that they keep. They knew the first shot had injured him badly, but they wouldn't give him a medical accommodation from the second one because they had an arbitrary narrow policy where they said they would only give medical exemptions if you had a lab test showing an allergy to one of the components. Now, Mr. Pastrana, right, and now you you went to an allergist and he said, I can't give you a lab test because you're on drugs to suppress the ongoing severe anaphylaxis. And we can't take you off those drugs because you could, get hurt or die because this is a
Sujata,
severe reaction.
Sujata, this almost sounds like the Three Stooges are running this. This almost sounds like who's on first, what's on second. It sounds like it makes no sense. If he can't take the one and only test that would prove, in their eyes, that he deserved a medical exemption, how can they move forward with the second shot? I'm sorry, it's completely
It would be. It would be. And I wish it was comic, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it is, it is so outrageous that it's almost comic. And yet it is the single worst, instance of human cruelty that I have seen in these cases. When it comes to the medical exemptions, these people, and this doesn't just happen to O'Brian, I've seen this happen with kids too. People are adopting these narrow policies and just excluding all of these people that are at risk of harm. Like employers are doing it, schools are doing it, and saying, well, we're not going to focus anymore on whether someone's at risk of harm. We're just going to say we have this one and only thing we'll accommodate, and everyone else, too bad. So what the heart of the legal issue is this: do we have a constitutional right not to take a vaccine when we have a clear contraindication or risk of serious harm? And, you would think that we do. And even back in 1905, the city brings up this case, Jacobson v. Massachusetts. The government constantly brings it up. It's a 1905 case that says that governments can mandate vaccines. But even in that case, they recognized a hard constitutional limit. And that limit was, if you are at risk of particular harm from the vaccine, it is not only cruel and inhuman in the last degree, but unconstitutional to force you to take it. And the courts can and must step in.
Wait, so let's go over this 1 second. So now, people in our space, Sujata, in the medical freedom space, Jacobson is the boogeyman. Jacobson is the over a century old precedent that they use against us time and time and time again to say they can inject us like cattle. There's nothing that we can do about it. However, in O'Brian's case, you are referencing Jacobson to your benefit and to your client's benefit, saying that Jacobson even recognized you can't force an injurious shot on an individual. I have that correct?
You do. And
how did they rule against that in the lower court?
The lower court is ignoring that core limit from Jacobson and has expanded.
They just don't reference it in their decision.
They ignored it and they said he could leave his job. So even if that's true, he could have just left his job to avoid the harm. Now, this runs against over a century of Supreme Court case law that says you can't impose constitutional injuries by conditioning benefits on them. So, I think we have a very strong legal argument, but even more important than the law is the principle. This is about medical freedom, but it goes much deeper and has massive significance, because even in 1905, right, they recognized this hard limit that public health can't be achieved through human sacrifice. So, that is what they're essentially saying now, is they're going to even get rid of that guardrail. I mean, look at when Jacobson was decided. That was an era, it's called the Lochner era. It was an era where that same Supreme Court was rejecting all worker protections, essentially. People would try to impose laws on wage and hour laws or other kind of safety laws, and they'd say, no, you go to work at your own risk. Employers can, say my way or the highway about anything. And essentially, you're disposable. You're a cog in the machine. And if you get injured, we'll throw you away and get somebody else to replace you. Now, that body of case law has been overruled since then. We now recognize that workers are human beings. They deserve protection. They deserve rights. They deserve to stand up against their employer. And what the lower court is doing now is they are essentially going back to that bad old era and not even recognizing the one limit that court set, which is that if you have a, a contraindication and are at risk of serious harm from a vaccine, it cannot be mandated on you.
So,
and they're trying to, yeah.
So this is just so important. Everybody needs to come out to Lower Manhattan on Monday, June 22nd. Let's put that flyer back up, Lou, so everybody can see. Coming out to the Thurgood Marshall U.S. Courthouse, 40 Foley Square in Manhattan, 17th floor, room 1703 at 2 p.m. We have been there for so many cases, but this is a case that's getting ready. If the judges don't see that the public still cares about this, that there is still eyes and attention on this, they're getting ready to say that in the name of public health, human sacrifice is tolerable. That's where we're getting to. That's the end run of the insanity of COVID, at least in the Second Circuit, at least in New York and in the states that's going to impact. But that will set a federal precedent that might be referenced all across the nation. So this is very important to all my New York City and New York people, medical freedom fighters. We've been here before. You know how to get to the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. We need people to show up respectfully, go into the court and watch these arguments happen. O'Brian, I just want to ask you, you've been through so much. You've been through a lot right now. What is your hope? What are your prayers? What is it that you are hopeful to see on Monday, after Monday, and beyond? Whatever your comments are, I just want to hear your opinion.
You know, Mike, I hope that I feel as though what's gone on with me is already a loss. And excuse me, but if this is for me to speak on behalf of those who don't have that opportunity, then I'm going to do that for as long as I can, for as long as you all let me. And I apologize because this sucks. But if nobody remembers what's going on with a few like myself or many who have been affected adversely, I want to put it out there that don't believe the hype, man. This isn't something that's rare and happening to, just a few people. Every time I speak about COVID, everybody knows someone, or knows someone that someone knows that's either gone or been affected. And seeing professional athletes drop dead on TV, seeing news anchors, collapse on TV, seeing our first responders die on a ridiculous level, the red flags to me were apparent from the beginning. And it might be easy for everybody to just cover the sky with their hands, look forward, don't worry about nothing that doesn't affect you, but if I may, firefighter Vincent Malveaux was only 30 years old when he died of a medical episode. Joseph Maiello was 53 when he died of a medical episode. Thomas Kearney was 60 when he died of a medical episode. Jesse Gerhard was only 33 when he died of a medical episode. And Robert Cruz was 44. These are all quote unquote medical episodes by the New York City Fire Department that has not acknowledged what has happened. And this is not normal.
It's not normal at all, O'Brian. All throughout this process, I talked to countless firefighters who said, Mike, we've never seen this. We've never been to, we're used to going to funerals for people who get caught in fires, who get burnt up, who inhale smoke and die. And God bless all the first responders that put their lives on the line. We're not used to seeing 33-year-olds just keel over dead from a medical episode, from a heart attack, from an unknown reason. So this is very, very well known for a long time in the firehouses. O'Brian, you are a patriot. and a warrior. God bless you. You've been coming up to Albany and fighting. You've been lobbying when necessary. You were at Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C., showing your presence there, talking to people, working on this stuff behind the scenes. God bless you so much. And just one more time, everybody, this Monday, June 22nd, 2 p.m., come to downtown Manhattan, Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. You could get all updates at teachersforchoice.substack.com. We've done this before. It's time to do this again for O'Brian Pastrana, for every firefighter that's been injured or killed, for every adult and child that has been injured or killed by a vaccine. This is a critical moment where I can't believe this, but we have to say no. Human sacrifice is not okay, not even in the name of public health. O'Brian Pastrana, Sujata Gibson, thank you both so much for coming on this morning. I'm sure I'll have you back on soon.
Thank you,
as well.
Michael.
Thank you very much. So we are about to go to Meryl Nass, reforming the regulatory state. But before we go to that, Surgeon General Joseph Ladap spoke at Advocacy Day last week in Washington, D.C., and he gave some really, really kind words to Children's Health Defense. Before we go to Meryl and her guest, let's watch that clip.
What I really admire about CHD is that, CHD's story has been this, and it was this before the pandemic when people like me were looking at the organization and didn't think they were really, didn't think they were reputable or honest or accurate. They continued with the same drumbeat during the pandemic, and lots of people started hearing more and listening more, including me. And they're still doing it now, even when some people thought that all problems were fixed about a year and a half ago. And so I greatly appreciate the organization's dedication, beyond steadfast, to truth, without exception, without compromise. I love it. I'm so appreciative of you guys.
Okay, that was quick. Good morning, CHD. Today, I have a guest I haven't had before, but probably many at CHD are familiar with her, Bretigne Shaffer, who has been a journalist of economics and politics in Asia, is a mother, has been working on health freedom issues for the last 11 years. She is a deep thinker, and today she brings a new angle to the issue of what is wrong with our culture and how do we fix it? How can we fix the political conundrum we're in, where it seems like every mechanism we attempt to use to fix things gets beaten down? And so I want to introduce Bretigne. We're going to talk mostly about food and healthcare, but then we're going to veer off and expand it into how what we're saying really applies to every institution in the country. So welcome, Bretigne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you begin and give us a little idea about what is wrong with our culture, with our system of government, and how we can become more free.
Yeah, so essentially, we're all asking the question, how can we reform the regulatory state? How can we get the regulatory state to work for us and to protect us? And my answer to that is actually very short. We can't. And that's for two reasons. One is most of the regulatory state is doing what it was intended to do. And we see this in medical licensing, which I know you've had personal experience with. What a lot of people don't recognize is that when the push for stronger medical licensing began in the 19th century, late 19th century, and the AMA was formed, the people who were pushing for this were explicit about the fact that the purpose of medical licensing was to restrict the supply of doctors and raise the amount of money that they were making. So just briefly, what was happening at that time, I know a lot of viewers are familiar with this, but there was a schism between the homeopaths and other more holistic healers and what was to become the allopathic model. And the allopaths were losing market share to the homeopaths especially. And they didn't like that. And so one of the things they did a number of things to try to forcibly restrict their competition. But one of those things was to establish I shouldn't say established because there was very, very limited medical licensing before this, but to strengthen medical licensing and make it a real thing. And they were explicit that the reason they were doing this was because there were too many doctors and doctors were not making enough money. So I think, and a very similar story is true for antitrust. People were taught to think that it was something that was implemented in order to protect the public, and that was the language used at the time. But when you dig into the motives behind the people who were pushing for it, and B, the actual situation, it didn't. What they were saying was happening in the marketplace was not happening, and the people who wanted to implement this new regulatory machinery were doing it because they wanted to control their competition. So that's a long way of saying that these institutions were not put in place for our benefit, and so we shouldn't be surprised when they're not used for our benefit.
So Brittany, let me dive in, if I
Yeah.
may. The first antitrust laws were enacted in the US around 1890. And there were some problems. I mean, the book Arrowsmith, I believe. Anyway, the same author, if I got the title wrong, did show problems in the butchering, slaughtering, preparation, and sales of meat. So it wasn't that there were no problems, but that there's often a double. What's the word? There's the secondary gain. There is another reason to put certain laws in place that we are often not aware of at the time they're enacted. And so that was the case with these meat laws. And then they were used to put the smaller guys out of business because they couldn't afford to meet the standards. And that has been going on until today. So now it's 135 years later. And these same meat laws, which have been extended, expanded, made more rigorous, and in some cases made in a way that is anti-human. For instance, this need to put radio trackers on cows if they're going to cross a state line. I mean, how does that improve the quality of the meat? It doesn't. It just makes things more expensive for farmers and gives the federal government an opportunity to know where every cow is in case it wants to. And I guess now they can say, well, with the screwworm, maybe we need to know where every cow is. But in fact, the screwworm problem exists because the United States was not aggressive enough in preventing the screwworm problem over the past, 5 or 6 years. So I just wanted to say that that some regulation has its good and bad sides. There are sometimes we need regulation. For example, when drugs can be made with carcinogenic substances, and so you want an FDA that is going to check the manufacturing and make sure that we don't have carcinogens in our drugs. In fact, FDA knew there were carcinogens in some of the drugs and let them go for several years until a lawsuit was brought, and finally they had to halt those particular drugs. This was recent. This was about 5 years ago. So go ahead. Now I'll let you continue.
That's a really important point, and I don't like to focus too much on what the motives were because, as you say, there can be very good reasons there. It's not that businesses always behaved wonderfully or there were no bad actors, but what ended up happening was this machinery was created that can be used as a bludgeon and has been used as a bludgeon and I'm talking about the regulatory state in its entirety here. The issue is not so much that we don't need a way to know if medicines have dangerous stuff in them. That's clearly a thing that we want to have. The question is, do we have the right kind of machinery to effectively find that out? And what I'm saying is that you need some form of accountability. You can't get that kind of result from a system that doesn't have accountability. And the FDA is not accountable to us. And I say it can't be. I say that, so going back to monopoly theory, and I don't want to get too bogged down in this, the whole sort of foundation of antitrust law relies on monopoly theory that's actually very flawed. But the whole idea is that if you have a monopolist, if you have one producer who is so powerful that they're no longer accountable to customers, they can raise prices, they can lower the quality of their goods, and that's a problem. What happened prior to antitrust was people were claiming this is what was happening, but in fact, consumer prices were actually dropping in the industries that they were talking about. But that doesn't mean the theory is entirely wrong. The theory actually is correct if you have a genuine monopolist, one that cannot be challenged. And that's
Okay, I want to interrupt again.
Yeah, please.
So what we have now in both the food and health industries are near monopolies, where defined as four companies controlling at least 40% of a market. We have that in vaccines, where four companies control almost 100% of the market. And the near monopolies can act just like a monopoly. They collude together, they make deals, they work together to beat down the smaller competition and raise prices in a way so that they don't undercut each other to get rid of competition. Who was it that said, was it one of the Rockefellers that said competition is a crime? However, we have rules on the books that make these practices illegal.
So the
So what the problem is we have these antitrust laws, anti-monopoly laws on the books that could be employed to solve these problems, and yet our executive federal agencies are not employing them. They are not investigating these monopolies or near monopolies. And this is a reason, for example, why the cost of meat has become so high in the United States, because the near monopolists have colluded together to raise the prices together and to keep supply down. They've both at the level of owning the animals of the feedlots, and particularly where they are able to really have a stranglehold on the production of beef is at the level of the slaughterhouse, where four companies control 85% of that market. And so they can lower the number of slots for cows and pigs available to be slaughtered, and thus keep the supply down and keep the prices up. So they get paid more than they were getting before for doing less work.
Yeah.
And butchering fewer animals.
Yeah. So the broader point I want to make about that is the reason that we can't get the government to enforce antitrust laws the way that maybe we would like them to is because the antitrust enforcement body is itself a monopoly, and it is not accountable.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think that is the key, that once you start digging into that and realize this is what we're not told in Econ 101, it's well, these problems with monopoly can develop, and so we need the government to step in and fix things, but it doesn't discuss the problem of, well, the government's a monopoly, and how are we going to hold it accountable? And we're witnessing now exactly what you're talking about. And I just want to add, with the slaughterhouses, I don't think you even need to have monopoly or oligopoly or near monopoly. I don't think you even need that to create the problems that we're seeing, because there's built into the system regulations and laws that disadvantage smaller producers. And the slaughterhouse one is a great example of that. And Joel Salatin talks about this all the time, because it's true that, there's this requirement. It's a legal requirement. You have to, if you're going to, produce beef for the market, you have to send your cows to one of their approved slaughterhouses. You can't just send it to any old slaughterhouse, which for, it might be a couple 100 miles away from where you are. It's costly, and this is true for all of the regulatory state. I think this is another really, really important thing to understand, that any regulation that's imposed is going to have costs. And those costs are much easier to bear for a large corporate entity. They can absorb them. They can remain competitive. They're in a much better position to take on those costs. These costs are costs that can kill smaller producers. And so it's even if people weren't colluding, or even if there were a larger number of the big producers, the problem is embedded in the system. The problem is that the rules by which they have to play disadvantage small producers. And again, I think farming is a great example of that, but it's not only in farming, it's really everywhere.
Right. Okay. So, what do we do about it?
I think the first thing to do, I mean, I guess I'll say I don't really have an answer. But the first thing to do is to recognize the nature of the problem. And I really think it does come down to real monopoly and real unaccountability. And, there are things we can do. Thomas Massey, his Prime Act, I think, would make things better. Definitely we can fight these things at the legislative level, knowing that, just as as Thomas Massey has learned, you're going up against Goliath. You're going up against this immense entrenched machinery that is not on your side, and that's very difficult to beat. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and I'm glad he's doing that. So that's one thing, is we can attack these laws individually and try and open things up. I mean, in farming, really, my sense, and I think Joel Salatin thinks this way too, is that if you just got rid of all of those restrictions, small independent farming could become much more profitable than it is. It could be much more lucrative, and it could be an attractive place for young people to put their time and energy. And I think that's Joel Salatin's dream, is to reinvigorate farming. I think the way to do that is get rid of these restrictions, because right now it's hampered by the disadvantage that it has. I'll just mention briefly, some people, including some farmers, Amos Miller is a famous case, operate in the private. And so you start a private membership association. People do this to sell milk, to sell raw milk, for example. If there's some regulation that's or licensing requirement that's hampering what you can do and what you can offer to people, one way to not be subjected to that, to be outside of the jurisdiction of that licensure, is to serve private members.
Okay.
And so
Again, let me interrupt. So,
Yeah.
because the rules say if you're selling to the public,
Right.
but if you have a private organization and you're only trading within that organization, you're no longer making your product available to the public. The people in your organization presumably know all about it, know the people who are selling, et cetera, and made a specific choice to use this organization to obtain product. So that is still allowed. Although I must say, the USDA and the states have gone after private membership organizations as well, but legally they have a stronger structure and can often effectively defend themselves against that.
Yes, and that's a good point to make too, because just because you're on the right side of the law doesn't mean they're not going to come after you. And it can be, the process can be the punishment. Even if you end up winning in court, what did it cost you? What did you have to go through? And most people, rightly so, aren't prepared to go through that kind of trial just, to keep doing what they're doing. So it's not, there's no easy answer. There's no, well, we just have to do A, B, and C, and this is all resolved. I think we fight this on many fronts.
So we are fighting it on a few fronts. So Thomas Massey brought the Prime Bill, which has passed in the House version of the Farm Bill, which would allow states to designate up to 5 custom slaughterhouses that would no longer require USDA inspectors to be on site. These are slaughterhouses that have already proven themselves to be clean, and it would be a pilot project. And in a couple of years, if it was working well, the state could designate 5 more. And this is huge because at the present moment, legally, unless an animal is butchered in a slaughterhouse where there is a USDA inspector working at that very moment, you cannot sell the meat. You can give it away, but you can't sell it. And then the other thing that's happened in New Hampshire is that both the House and Senate in New Hampshire have passed a bill that would allow farmers to butcher up to 3 cows or 5 pigs or 10 goats or sheep per month and sell directly to the public, or allow a custom slaughterhouse to butcher and sell this number of animals to the public for the farmer. And this is huge. It hasn't been signed yet by the governor. So a custom slaughter facility simply means no USDA inspector. It's a private facility, usually only used for game. If you've shot a deer or a moose, you want to bring it to a custom slaughterhouse to prepare it for you. Or if a farmer is preparing food for himself or for a donation. That is what they're for. And we've lost thousands of these custom slaughterhouses over the last, it's almost 60 years since the most rigorous version of USDA's regulations came through and really stopped people from butchering at home or on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's unclear whether USDA really has this authority. Did Congress really give it to them? It doesn't seem like it did, and yet they have not been successfully challenged in the courts. It would, the Constitution says that the federal government only has the right to regulate things that the Constitution says they can regulate, and health and food are not so designated. So, according to the Constitution, the federal government should be leaving those things to the states to manage, regulate, make the laws about. But I don't know what the case law is, and maybe I need to get a lawyer who is familiar with all that to get on this show and tell us why the states. But anyway, what's happening now is at the same time as a state like New Hampshire is trying to push for the ability to regulate its own meat. And of course, one reason they were successful in getting this through is because of the shortage of meat and the cost. So it's a perfect time to work on it. But
Yeah.
But if it's only New Hampshire, the USDA will probably try to fight back in some major way. So, and they may fight back about the Prime Act as well. We need this to happen in more states, and we need to get really clear about what the USDA, and the FDA, what authorities they truly have and what they don't. In the meantime, these federal agencies are trying to basically usurp more and more power that was a right of the states. For instance, the right to regulate pesticides.
Yes.
And so that's being fought over right now. Congress is passing laws, or at least they passed it in the House Farm Bill. We don't have the Senate Farm Bill yet. We haven't seen it, and it hasn't been voted on. But it is trying to take over, get rid of any state regulation of pesticides. So what we had up until now was we had the EPA, which was licensing or registering pesticides. And then we had the states, which could make more strict laws. Just as for meat, the states could make more strict laws. And so some did. Massachusetts and California said, look, you can't raise up these animals, so they can't move. And they're in a crate or a box practically their entire life. And now the federal government is trying to say, no, the states do not have the right to do that anymore. We're taking it over.
Right.
And So it's very interesting. And the way our system is based, Congress apparently does have the right to make laws and tell the states, you don't have your constitutional rights anymore. And again, that would have to go through the courts, it'd take many years before it finally gets resolved.
Well, I think my friends at the 10th Amendment Center would disagree with that. That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that brings up another thing we can do is state nullification is something that is very constitutional. I should say state and local. And so this is another thing we can do is when there are federal laws coming down, yes, thank you. You as a locality, as a state, you can nullify them. You can say, no, we're not doing that here. And some states and localities have done, there's a history of doing this. Medical marijuana is sort of one of the big success stories. But that's another, I think the more draconian things get and the more, this blanket grab of granting immunity to corporations, with vaccines and now with pesticide manufacturers, that, you are no longer liable for the harm that you cause. That's a violation, not just of the Constitution, that's a violation of our entire system of jurisprudence and justice. And that's something that states should absolutely be nullifying. They should laugh at that and say, we're absolutely not honoring that here in our state. And the Constitution gives us the right to say no to this, and we're going to. So, so that's another tool that we have.
It is. But again, even though the Constitution is supposed to be the final arbiter of anything,
Who enforces it?
the courts don't necessarily listen to it. And, the Supreme Court also, what we've learned over the last 5 to 10 years is that judges will vote based on whatever party put them in office, 95% of the time at least. And so you can really predict how any decision is going to go down. The one thing you may not be able to predict is what cases the Supreme Court decides to take. But once they take a case, you almost always know how it's going to wind up. Yeah. So, that's another problem. We don't have a judicial system. We don't have blind justice in this country. We have a politically motivated judicial system, which kind of negates the whole idea of the judiciary.
It really does. And I don't think people realize how serious a problem that is. I know we have to wrap up soon. I just wanted to say really quickly, my dad was a constitutional law professor. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, the Constitution is that document that prevents the government from doing all the terrible things it does. He was saying for years, he passed away in 2019, but he was saying for decades exactly what you said. Yeah, we have this great document, but the system doesn't work to enforce it, to protect it.
Yes, exactly. Well, there we are, but there is hope. The states can attempt to reassert their power. Mm-hmm. Individuals can join private membership organizations or trade privately with cash. That's another reason they want electronic money, because they don't want you to be able to use cash and have secret transactions. If I want to buy, the meat from a lamb from my local farmer, they don't want me to be able to pay with cash to do that. And the government not only wants a cut in their taxes, but they want to cut, they want to get the farmer in trouble too. So, anyway, we can do those things. We must continue to have cash. We cannot go to digital money, which of course will immediately become programmable, and then they will be able to just, give you a haircut every year or every month or however often.
Or turn off your account if you say things, turn off your access to your money if you say things they don't want you saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Particularly on the internet. Yeah. That was why the board went after me, was because of an interview on the internet. And that their first bill of charges against me had nothing to do with how I practice medicines. Did you say this? Did you say this? Did you say this?
Right.
And then they realized they didn't want to fight a First Amendment case. So then they made up new charges based on my records weren't good enough. But anyway.
Right. They do.
Yeah. After confusing everyone, trying to make them think that off-label prescribing was illegal when 20% of all drugs are prescribed off-label in the United States. So in any event, so the government pays dirty, the regulatory agencies will play dirty, they won't necessarily obey the law. They have other agendas, and it's really going to be up to us to learn what our rights are and then to demand them and not surrender them. Any final thoughts?
Um, I'll just
Well,
say, I think,
why don't you get back to the licensing issue?
yes, I do want to just mention with licensing, one of the problems with it is that it creates a false sense of security. And so we go in and, you know, say with medical licensing, you go into a doctor and think, oh, they're licensed. That means, you know, I'm going to get good service, I'm protected. We've learned in the last 6 years, if you didn't know already, we've learned that's not what it means. That doesn't do that. But there are a couple of papers that were written many years ago about licensing in general and medical licensing in particular, looking at, does it actually produce better results? Do you get better results in a system where people are licensed versus where they're not? And their findings were, no, you don't. And in particular, one thing people kind of assume that licensing boards are, you know, seeking out and getting rid of doctors who actually do bad things, who harm their patients, that kind of thing. And they found, no, they don't. In fact, the entities that do a better job of that are the malpractice insurance companies, because they've got something at stake there. But the licensing, that's not what they do. They get you to toe the line, make sure that you're doing what the pharma overlords want you to do. And in fact, I mean, this is a whole other can of worms, which I'm sure you've also talked about, but during COVID, not only were doctors not prevented from harming people, they were pushed into harming people. They were encouraged to harm people and worse. And that was all done through it was, you could argue that it was the licensing system that enabled that, because if you didn't go along with the protocols that were going to harm people, you risked your license and your ability to practice and your whole career. And so, in fact, it's counterintuitive because of how we've been trained to think about licensing, but in fact, it actually enables bad actors and it enables bad practices, and we're still living through that.
Right. So, and in fact, and one more thing, the AMA was sued by chiropractors around 45 years ago because information had been leaked that the AMA was trying to, you know, get rid of the whole practice of chiropractic.
Oh,
And, yeah, so the chiropractors took them to
wow.
court because they were illegally, you know, using machinations to try to de-license and just end chiropractic in the US.
Wow.
And the chiropractors won. So that's interesting. I didn't know about that case. Gary Knoll told me about it a few months ago.
Wow.
So yeah, good evidence of how the use of licensure can be completely twisted. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. This has been delightful.
Yes,
And
thank you for having me.
yeah, hope we get to talk again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell us your name.
Ashley Arduin.
And you are?
I'm Ezekiel Arduin.
What's your name?
Ezekiel.
Nice. And how old are you?
I'm 16.
16. Okay, and this is a story about you?
Yes.
How many children do you have?
I have 4 sons.
And you're the big guy?
Yes, I'm the oldest.
Okay, 4 sons.
Yes.
Wow. Fun times in your house.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do your story and then we're going to find out about what you did with the other children in a minute. So let's start with him. Talk about when you were pregnant with him. Did you have a conversation about vaccines?
No, I was not that aware. You know, I was kind of raised to where you kind of trust the system and they knew more about it and they actually cared about you. And so I knew a little bit as far as I had a cousin that had gotten autism. And so that's something that he had struggled with. And so because of that, my aunt encouraged me just to like spread vaccines out. I didn't know a ton about it other than that. And she said, see if you can separate the MMR. And so I just went based off of her word. They didn't allow to separate the MMR, but the other vaccines at the beginning, I spread them out as much as possible because they would come out and there's like 5 things they want to give them and it's just too much. And he would cry the whole way home and it would make me cry the whole way home. And so it wasn't until having any issues really, because I've kept them spreading out. Of course, they try to belittle you and make you feel like you're not a good parent if you don't get those things.
Can you remember some of the things they said to you?
It's more of just like demeanor, like I would do that if that was my son. If that was my kid, I would get those things. Are you sure you want to do that? You know, you don't want to have them have something and then it's too late. And so the looks that they would give for you and frown upon it, or every time you would go in for a checkup, they're like, you really are delayed. You need to get those taken care of, those vaccinations taken care of. So we ended up going to 18 months. And I went in for his MMR, still skeptical and asking, can we separate this? And they said, no, it's only in one shot. It was less than a week after that vaccine that he just stopped talking. He went from hi mom, bye, big truck, dada, all those things, waving, eye contact, all that, to just blah, 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 blah. That's what he would do. He would start playing with toys on the floor. Everything was just looking, tags, everything would bother him. He would scream if you caught his food, which was always, that was the normal. Just a lot of different things that I didn't know what to do with. And as we had more kids, he would be a little more aggressive and you'd have to take him off. You know, it's like he didn't know where he was doing or what he was at, kind of thing. And so with the second child, still thinking, okay, maybe it was just him because he tried to come out early and I was in the hospital at 31 weeks. But then I did the same thing with the second kid, except he didn't have that same outcome. I spread it out just to furthermore the vaccines. However, at one point he regressed when I had my fourth kid with like the bathroom issues and all that. And through that, he ended up...
It was the third.
Well, the third, but there was the fourth as well, is when he got really, really bad, to where 2.5 years of not using the bathroom, have to know where to pull up and all that kind of stuff. And so a friend told me, hey, you need to take a holistic path and go check out Dr. Brett in this city and where we lived. And I did, and within 30 minutes he told me everything that was wrong with my son, from vaccinations and the inflammation and all these things that it was causing. And he told me to take away 5 different items of food, take away all those things from his diet, and within 3.5 days he pooped on the potty for the first time in 2.5 years, and we just kept going with that. And so we've taken that holistic approach with him, with what things that he eats, the kind of stuff, the timing that he eats.
Do you remember the foods that he was telling you to eat?
He was telling us to avoid gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and sugar. As all of those cause inflammation, he says vaccines cause lots of inflammation in the body, and the body can't do things. And then he said that, of course, antibiotics cause inflammation, and they had so many ear infections when they were little, and so the doctors just throwing them at us, you know, not giving us a holistic approach at all. And so all of that just causes too much between the brain and the body and the signaling and things that are going on there. And so he said in order to help move forward with a lot of things, we had to get the trash out of the way and detox the body, and then move forward with getting the brain and the body to connect. And so it's been years of crying, it's been years of frustration, it's been years that I was mad at him at times, thinking like, you've got to come out of this, like it's you, maybe you're the problem, you know, which is horrible. But you go through those things, and then times where you just cry and wish that you could take it all back, and like if I could start over, I would never give vaccinations. Now my younger 2 sons, I just had what they gave in the hospital, which later I learned that was really bad, but the other 2 I avoided all the MMR and everything because I was very scared.
So your last 2 children had vitamin K, Hep B at birth?
Yes, and then I just quit. And
so you didn't do 2 months, 4 months?
No, I didn't do all those vaccinations.
So they only had what the hospital gave them?
What the hospital gave them.
And how are those 2?
They're perfectly fine. They don't have any issues. They've never had issues. They don't have any learning disabilities. I homeschool all 4 of them. They've been in school at times. So I just wish that people would know more, and that more was out there, which there is now, and there's so much more. But even when I moved here 4 years ago, just trying to get them to get a yearly checkup, there was like first 10 places I called, they wouldn't take you unless you were fully vaccinated.
They're not sick.
Well, because they're not sick, but the younger two, I wanted to put in a public school, and they have to have a checkup in order to be in the school system. And so I had to find somewhere, which was sad because no one wanted to take us unless we were vaccinated fully. And so I finally found one place here in Cleveland that would take that. So, and
Are you best friends with the people outside?
No.
Like, you need to be.
Okay.
I'm gonna help you.
Okay.
You took one for the team, so did your brother, and it's helped your other two. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sorry that happened to you.
You're welcome.
We were all lied to. Tell us about you now. How do you feel?
I feel good. I can do a lot more. I don't know how to say it, but I'm very active. Where I like to do a lot of stuff. I play the drums. I rock climb. I also do parkour. So a lot of stuff most kids with autism can do. I'm not saying that's offensive or anything, but me and Isaiah, I feel like even though we had those tragic events, we still are normal, and we have friends that are completely normal, didn't go through that stuff, and yet they enjoy our company.
Well, he still struggles. He has dyslexia, and so
yes, I have that.
And his frontal lobe is highly active, and so we've worked with functional neurologists to help that, and then along with the eating. So he still struggles with reading and writing, but attention, sometimes he'll still flap and look up and just get excited, but it's been way more controlled as we've taken the holistic approach, whereas before you couldn't get him to stay focused on doing more than one dish at a time. So it's been a process. So this is the best we've seen him. And so we're just going to continue that path.
Thank you.
Totally amazing. And what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thinking about being a helper at the company Lego.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah. Probably think about inventing some of the sets that they build there.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So what do you think about vaccinations?
I honestly don't like them myself. They just make your body feel crappy and inside unhealthy. A lot with me, I have a lot of snotty noses where I just have to blow my noses. Okay, I messed up, but I have to blow my nose a lot, and I think it was because of that vaccination, putting extra junk in my body, having to blow it out.
Okay.
We detox a lot. We try to get rid of heavy metals. And so we do a lot of infrared saunas, a lot of potato slices in the socks and the feet. And
does that work?
Yeah, it's so gross.
Let's just go back a second. You put a potato slice in your sock when you're feeling a bit sick?
Yeah, so you would put a potato, and you would have a white potato. You put it in your foot, and depending of how messed up your body was, how toxic it was, the more black the potato will come in. We've taken it off, and it's been like pure black.
So how long is it in your sock for?
Just for the night.
Yeah.
Right
But
before they
doesn't the
get
potato
to
go
bed.
black anyway?
No, because we've put it out on the counter and it doesn't go black. It stays
It's an
white.
organic potato, I presume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a try. Again, people, no one's giving medical advice out here. These are just, we're learning from real people on the ground in America, what's helped them, what hasn't, and you guys make your own decisions up. But I'm definitely, Claire, we're trying the potato tonight. Yep, it's happening. Anything else you want to tell the people?
Don't get vaccinated. Your body is amazing as it is and can handle anything. You don't need to put that in your body.
It's unnatural.
Last words?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you both for coming here.
You're welcome.
Telling the story.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.